Hey guys, it's your host Julian. This week I'm sitting down and talking to Batman the Animated Series writer, as well as the composer for the Animaniacs, Mr. Randy Rogel. This is another one of those episodes that I thought I lost about 5 years ago, so I apologize for the audio. I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons that help support this podcast. Bill, Brent, Bryce, Eight-Legged Bird, Jacob, and Jordan. Thank you all so much for your support. It truly means a lot. If you want to become a member of our Patreon channel to help support this podcast and get all these episodes early and ad-free, follow the link below and sign up today. Now, let's get to that chat with Randy.
Do you remember that initial spark or that initial thought that you had taken, like, I want to be a writer or I want to do music, but I want to do it professionally with cartoons or animation or movie or in the Hollywood industry? Do you remember that initial thought of, hey, man, I might be able to do this professionally?
I don't think it really ever happens like that. We have just sort of one single moment of an epiphany. So sort of an evolution thing as you move into it. I had grown up doing a lot of acting. I was from San Diego and I worked at the Old Globe Theater, a lot of the other theaters there. And then I, like you, I went to the military. So I was completely divorced from any kind of professional theater I did as a kid. Then I ended up, when I didn't plan to make the military my career. And so when I was able to get out, I went into corporate life and they moved me up to Seattle, I remember. And I was always planning to come back to Southern California, but up there was a lot of theater. And so I started getting back into it. And that's where, and I'd always, because I'd done musical theater, I'd taken piano lessons. I was a terrible student as a kid, but I liked, I'd done lots of musicals. And I think I was exposed because as a kid to a lot of these real pros, I got exposed to good stuff, stuff that was, in my generation. So I'd been, the Gershwins, the Cole Porters, those kind of guys. Plus, in the 70s, the whole Motown I loved and that rock, Jesus Christ Superstar just came out. That was big for us. So when I was up in Seattle working in corporate life, I had always wanted to get back in theater and I did. But at some point I thought, I really think I'd like to be working in film and television, which is down in Los Angeles. So I left my job and I came down here thinking I would be an actor. I'd always been a pretty good writer. I'd written some songs, but nothing professionally. And when I got down here, as I began auditioning around, nobody knew me. And plus I didn't have any, directing degrees from USC. My degree is in, I have a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from West Point. That doesn't go very far in Hollywood, when they're looking for people who are going to be directors and writers. But I remember I was auditioning around, getting up to the producer level, but I was also writing. I watched, and agents were looking at my scripts and liking them. And so they'd say, well, give me something for this show, so I'd write whatever, I think I wrote a Roseanne episode. I wrote these are all spec scripts. I think Coach was on at that time. And Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, I remember I wrote one of these spec scripts. And what had ended up happening, it landed me at Warner Brothers working on Batman, which was an animated series. And I didn't know anything about animation, but they said, well, we want it to be really dark. We want it to feel live action. And I remember seeing that sizzle reel by Bruce Timm and Eric Radomski gave me a real feel for it. So I really, I know there's kind of a lot of throat clearing here, but I started as a writer of scripts, and, both television and features. And because I'd had such a strong background in musical theater, and because wherever I lived, I lived in Europe for 4 years as an usher, I just rented a piano. I always had a piano and I would, just practice and play for my own enjoyment. So I got better and better as I did that. So as we were doing Batman, and Batman was an immediate hit. It was a real surprise to me. Like here I'm at a major studio all of a sudden working on a hit show. But down the hall there were the guys doing Tiny Toons. That was Steven Spielberg's show. And I was thinking, yeah, I want to work on that show. I want to work on that show too, And they said, no, you write that dark stuff, Batman, and this is a comedy show. And I thought, well, comedy is me. I've done tons of comedy. So that's when I had written some funny songs for a cabaret, for a show we did up in Seattle and other places. And so I thought, let me write, I had an idea for a funny song, which was All the Countries of the World. Yeah. So I wrote this song with All the Countries of the World. I brought that in. I showed it to Tom Ruger, who was the producer and showrunner for Animaniacs. He liked it. And I expressed I wanted to work on the show. He was like, oh, I don't know, but let me see, And I remember I did a little script with Peter Hastings. Peter really became the driving force behind Pinky and the Brain. But it was that song that they went to Stephen and he liked it. And so he said, well, have him do another one, do the states and their capitals, right? So I did that one. And then it was, do another one. It was like all these list songs. I said, guys, I can do more than a list song. I wrote I'm Mad. I started writing these other songs. And that's what really began to hit for them. And so I was kind of straddling Batman and Animaniacs. And then slowly more and more I moved over to Animaniacs. And when the show came out, it was immediate, hit with that. And, I got this lovely little note from Steven Spielberg that said, I didn't quite know what I wanted to do with the show, with the anime, but I really like these songs. So you're going to be my little Gershwin. I want you, to be like Tin Pan Alley up here, and they rolled a piano into my office. So I had this piano. So that's how I didn't at one time think, well, I'd like to write song, it was this sort of slow evolutionary process. And because it hit and got better and better. And I think all I was doing really was just drawing on the greats. If you listen to my music, it really comes out of that era, of sort of that standard Broadway or just the standard classic songs of the 20s, 30s, 40s. In fact, I'm now doing a musical. I just finished a new musical, which, will take New York, and it's got that kind of feel too. But the zeitgeist was in the right place, I think, because when that hit, we just would write songs about anything. I'll write a funny song about like the countries, or I'll write a funny song. Like one day I was driving, my kids were having a fight in the back, and so that made me think of the car, kids. And then Tom would come to me with what if we did a song for this? So that's how it happened. It really took off. The fans loved it, the critics loved it. So more and more I began, and the next thing I started getting calls from Disney. Calls from the other studios. So I became known as a songwriter, which to my chagrin was like, well, wow. So I've been writing scripts all this time, but I've written for everything over since. I wrote a lot for Warner Brothers, but I wrote for Cinderella, I wrote for Winnie the Pooh, I wrote for Milan, Aladdin, and all those. And I just finished 2 big projects for Netflix and all. So that's really how it happened. It was a surprise to me. If you'd have told me back when I was like you in the military that someone say, someday you're going to make a living as a songwriter, I would have went, what? Are you crazy? But that's what's happened. So I feel like I've, maybe I just lucked out, or for some reason I have a knack for that. So I'm grateful for it.
Having a knack for it. There's one thing I love about meeting great people like yourself and great people like Rob and Billy West and all these other people that I've had on this podcast. You guys are some of the most humble people I've ever met in my life. He's like, yeah, I did this. He's like, and Rob's always got this thing where he's like, I don't write them, I don't draw them, but I try to do everything I can to bring it out and put that heart and soul into it. And the one thing I really wish, I told you earlier that I had that quote written down here, and I wish I knew where it was right now, because I went back and listened to that Rob episode, and I took that quote out, and he essentially said that this was like the greatest thing he had ever seen. He had such more eloquent way of saying it than I just did, but it was beautiful when he talked about it, because he went into him listening to it, and then his wife was like, what are you listening to? And he's like, this is like the greatest thing I've ever heard. Listen to this. He was like, he took all of these countries and made them rhyme, and then he was like, it's catchy. And then he goes and tells me that he only did that on the first time they did Yakko's World on one take. And
that's true.
It blew my mind when he
said
that's
that. True. I was, Warner Brothers was nice enough, because I have a strong theater background, right? So I was being cast in shows, but major big shows. I became known as the guy. I did the Donald O'Connor role in Singing in the Rain. So I'm all over the country, and they would let me. Alan Burnett was nice enough to go to bat for me, because he was the showrunner of Batman. And he says, yeah, we should let him do it. As long as you get your scripts in on time and your songs on time, you have to be here in the office, right? So I was actually out of town when the songs of all the countries went in. It's called Yakko's World, went into production, right? And Rusty Mills, I remember, who's now passed away, but the late great Rusty Mills was he directed it. So I remember I get this call. Where was I? I think I was in New York. I get this call from him. He goes, like, where's the Spanish Sahara? So he was trying to figure out where, because I'd written a script for it. I said, here, as you hit them, as he points at the countries, they light up, and and so I tried to keep it going, from a continuous flow of the country, so he wasn't jumping around too much. And he said, oh yeah, I've got the we recorded it. And so because he was now storyboarding it. They would record the actor and then they would storyboard to the actor's performance. And he sent it back in those days. We had a thing, Julian, you're kind of younger than me. We had a thing called cassette tapes, right?
I had a couple.
Right. Okay. So all of you fans out there that, you can look that up. I'm sure a lot of you know what a cassette tape is, but he sends that to me, right? So I listened to it and I called my time. I said, who is this guy? I said, I hadn't met Rob yet. And they said, oh yeah. I said, he's really good. And Rusty said to me, you get this, Randy, he did it in one take. I go, no. He goes, yeah. He said, we did 2 takes just to have the second take, but we just kept the first take. And in fact, by the way, when we do the concert, we do Animaniacs Concert now. That's one of the songs we end up, because the crowds really like that. So we end up, and so Rob says, well, actually, why don't we bring up the cartoon and I'll sing on. I went, oh, I said, well, ladies and gentlemen, I was told that Rob actually did this in one take the first time. I don't know if I really believe that. So let's see if really he can do it one take, because the cartoon's going to keep running. If he screws up, the cartoon keeps going, right? So that's his challenge. And of course, he's so brilliant at that. He just meets the challenge. He's also just one of the nicest and most brilliant guys. You talk about Billy West. Billy is, he's scary talented, isn't he? I mean, really, it's just, you go, how do you do that? We were having dinner one time together, and he was talking to me because I'm a big fan of Futurama, right?
Fantastic.
And he was telling me, I told the story before, so I forgive fans who've heard this before, but he was talking to me. I said, where'd you come up with that voice? How do you? And he had watched of all movies, The Diary of Anne Frank.
Oh, wow.
And it was Ed Wynn. And I can't think of the other actor's name. He was British. And he had been the one that had been stealing the food, and he gets caught and all that. And so Ed Wynn was, it was you would have won it, and it was me, I stole from the children. And he's going back and forth because he does a perfect Ed Wynn, right? He goes back and forth between Ed Wynn and this British going on, and all of a sudden out pops Zoidberg.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, that's where you got that. That's how you did it, And I mean, I can't do what they do. Those voices. And by the way, I think one of the successes of, there are a lot of reasons for the success of Animaniacs. Great production. Tom did a great job, creating the show. The writers on it were great. But those actors, voice actors, Tress MacNeille, Jess Harnell, they get behind the glass, right? And then they begin to bring it to life. Sometimes they improv and all that. I was talking we brought Maurice LaMarche. Maurice plays the brain. He does so many voices. And he was, he was complimenting on me on something, and I'd written for the Pinky and the Brain. And I said, well, I see my job as basically the pitcher. I just have to put it over the plate. If I can get it anywhere near the plate for you, then I know you're going to put it over the fence. If I write something bad or crappy, no matter how much you try, you can try. It's not going to be that good because it's not good material. But if I can give you something to work with, and then they take that and they elevate it to such a high degree, so it's a collaborative process. But going back to that, Rob is an immense talent.
With that mindset that you just had, if you just get it to the plate, they'll take it from there. Is that something that you have developed over the years in this industry, or is that something that you had an inkling on back in the day, that if I just get it close, these guys are so talented, and girls, these guys and girls are so talented, they're going to take it 10 times farther than I got it to them? Or was it, like I said?
Well, as a being a performer too, and I'd seen many, many scripts, many, many songs too. It's always for me, my sort of my contract as a writer, or that is with the audience and with the performer who has to perform it. So when I write a song, I always write for the singer, and I make it as perfect as it can be. Used to be people would come to my office, what are you working on? They, oh, let me hear it. I was like, no, because because then you're going to give me notes, and I know that because it's not ready yet. But when you finish it, it needs to be so perfect. If there's anything about it you don't like, well, that part doesn't work. I guarantee you, the people you give it to aren't going to like it. Don't lie to yourself. Saying, well, maybe they'll like it. No, if you don't like it, they're not going to like it. So you get it as perfect as you can. And there's many times with songs I do that. When I get it, I look at it, I go, that song is done.
Yeah.
And then it goes to them. So now it's, like I say, really over the plate. It flows well. Same with scripts. And so it all comes down to, everybody does their part. Mm-hmm. And my part is to make that script or that song as perfect as possible. There's always a little editing process you go to. Then when Rob gets it, or Trash gets it, or Billy West gets it, or Maurice LaMarche gets it, and they perform. Nancy Cartwright was on our show. Nancy does Bart Simpson. Yep. When they get it, then they perform it, and they bring it to life. I just did something for Disney. I wrote a song for Billy Crystal for this new Monsters Inc. show. And he just gets it, and then, oh my God, it just elevates the song. Now, when he does that, then it goes to a storyboard artist, right? Who's sitting there with the little headphones on. He's drawing this as he sees it. Well, he's got the actors doing it in such a lively way that he knows how to draw it and make it. And so you get all these wonderful poses. Then it's got to go to the animator. The animator, everybody does their piece, but everybody's got to bring their game. And if somebody is sort of the weak link, it can really hurt the property. So, your job, wherever you are in that process, is to do as perfect a job as you can. And, when you work in a big studio with big money and names like PC, you do need to deliver, because if you don't, they'll end up saying,
bye.
No, we like you. It's been through shift. We want you off the show. It's not working out. So.
Now, with writing and then songwriting, and then you did a little bit of acting too, because that's how you got, into this industry. What did you feel more gratifying? Is it songwriting? Is it writing for a script, or was it acting? What makes you feel whole at the end of the day?
Well, this is really, you asked some really great questions, Julian.
Thank you.
I remember I was at the Paper Mill. It's a big theater. It's a transfer house in New Jersey for shows to Broadway. And we're doing Singing in the Rain there. Comden and Green came to it. They wrote the show. And I was with an actor, great actor guy. And we were sharing a dressing room. And we had I'm not kidding you, I was there for 4 months. I mean, it was a big, long run, 4 or 5 months. And as we were getting close to the end, he said, oh yeah, I got to get my resume out there and all that. And I was thinking, oh my God, that's right. As an actor, you're always looking for the next job. But I used to hear them, that's sort of an anecdotal story. I used to hear them sort of complaining about, I got to do this show again. I got to go out there. And it did occur to me, being a performer there with them, I said, when you're an actor, someone has written your lines for you. Someone has written all the songs for you and the lyrics. Someone has put the clothing and costume on you. Someone has built the set for you. Someone has directed all of this. There's the musicians down there playing. All you have to do is go on stage and do it. Now, you have to have the talent, of course. You have to have done the work of an actor, singer, dancer to bring that talent. But all you have to do is go do it. Now, when you were a writer, I would sit down in front of a blank piece of paper every day, and nothing says that if you do these 10 steps, at the end of that 10 steps, you're going to have a hit show, it doesn't work that way. You can work all day and go, oh, this is crap. So I find, and this is just for me, Julian, that there's a much bigger, pit in my stomach when I'm having to write, because I don't know what I'm thinking, okay, what would be funny? What would be great? Well, I have to come up with the idea. I have to come up with the cleverness and get it there. And then so that's very rewarding. But on the same side too, the writing for me and songwriting as well, both script and songwriting, is a very cerebral, exercise. We sit in our offices. When you're performing, especially when you're doing musical, it's a very physical role, because you're dancing, a lot of physical comedy. That's more the physical side of it. And I enjoy being able to do both of them. But that, for me, that's the major distinction. A lot of people give the actors real crap. Like I just watched The French Room.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm watching, so it was just brilliant, their performances. But lest we forget, who wrote that brilliant the material's got to be good, and then they're good too. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what popped into my
No,
head.
it did, man, because I wanted to know, like, what did you feel more at home with? And then knowing that you wrote all of this stuff and you did acting, you didn't do everything that you can do, is because you could have animated if if you had the talent for it and all this other stuff. But you've done two of the huge parts when it comes to
Yeah,
putting,
Julian, if I had to draw,
So I mean,
I tell you, Julian, if I had to draw for a living, I would starve to death. I can't draw a stick figure. I was one time, one of my Alfred Germano, brilliant artist. We were over at the house, we're partying, we're playing Pictionary. With two strokes of his hand, he would kick our ass. Because I can't draw. For the life. And those guys are brilliant. Oh my god! And you never want to piss off an animator, by the way, because you'll come to work and there'll be a big picture of you up on the wall with a hippo butt or something. Oh shit.
That's fantastic. When you would start, I want to get just a little bit deeper into writing with you for just a few minutes, because it's something that's super fascinating. You guys go and take something that goes from your brain to your hand, and you have to create a world for these actors and actresses to play in, right? So how, for you, I know you can't speak 100% for writers, but you can speak for yourself here. How do you come up with a premise? Do you start as an ending and then work yourself back, or do you start with some kind of like, oh, this happens, and then you build around it, or how do you do it?
Well, Julian, you're asking such great questions. I
Thank
think
you.
you really have an insight to this because you understand how it works. Um, it is a little different for people. You're right. I can't speak for the writers, although I've had this conversation with many writers as well. There's a great book by Stephen King, who's a very successful novelist, called On Writing, and
Yeah.
he sort of gets into this. The first half of the book is a little, it's sort of like, remember his accident and how he got, but then in the last half, he begins talking about like, what is the craft of writing? If you really want to get serious about it, and like you say, coming up with premises and all that. Because nobody knows exactly where we get our ideas from. I remember Paul Dini. This guy could come up with an idea like that. Paul is just a genius. Every week, we and I shared an office on one of the shows, and he's just so quick for an idea. Alan Burnett was also very good. I always thought I was pretty good on the premise ideas, not as good as Paul. But what happened for me on one of my early scripts, I remember, to answer your question about do you have an ending in mind or do you have the beginning in mind, is we had this great story, and I wanted, and Stephen King spoke to this. I had this idea where I had the Joker and Batman slugging it out on a roller coaster in this old abandoned amusement park. That'd be a great set piece, right? And I found, as I was writing it, I was concocting the story. I was forcing the story to go where I wanted it to go, and it didn't really follow that smoothly.
Yeah.
It was like a jump in the track, and I kept trying to work it, and I kept saying that doesn't work, and then I realized I had to just sort of have this courageous acceptance of the facts and say, let that go. So I didn't end up in the amusement park, and I didn't end up on that roller coaster, but I ended up on just someplace just as good. And Stephen King talked like that. He said what he does. He said, I think of a situation to put my characters in that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then I sit back and watch how my characters get out of that. What are they going to do? I start becoming them, and what would they do, and how and what would make an interesting thing. I think someone like Dan Brown really must plot to death, because his novels are all those twisting, turning corners on it. But so I guess it's your style. For me, generally, what we do is we get in the room at the beginning of a season. Like we're going to do season 2 of Batman.
Yeah. And
all the writers get in the room. It's an all-day thing. They have a stenographer, and they tell everybody come with 10 ideas. So we go, Julian, what do you got? I go, okay, oh, and then it hits the table. Everybody says, oh, what about this? And everybody begins to talk about those ideas. It becomes very fertile. Then it goes to the next guy. So by the end of the day, all these ideas have hit. And then that stenographer just writes up everything. But basically what the showrunner would do is say, okay, Julian, I want you to do the Riddler story.
Okay.
I like the premise on that idea. The Riddlers decide he's going to go straight, and Batman's going crazy trying to figure out what the guy's about. That, and so then that's when you take it back with just that sort of broad stroke, and you begin to plot out based on things you've heard, what you like, here's how I think that story should go. Here's what makes an interesting story. Then you would go to your story editor, or my guest Alan, he come back and go, yeah, I think that's really a weak point there, but this is interesting about, and you craft that out. And once you get it, you go to a kind of a detailed outline of everything that's going to happen in that story. And this works both for, I think, drama and comedy, features and all. You get a very great idea for the roadmap of how that's going to work. And that's when you go to script. And when you go to script, because then those are guys who can bring in dialogue, bring in visuals and all that, and the characters come to life. And there happen times like you're doing the script, you start to realize, actually it'd be better to kind of go this way or that. But that's the process I've seen most writers do. That's what I do. And now and then you will have, it comes to, we really need this, especially if you have a series with an arc. And so later on, there's a point, like if you're doing Game of Thrones, and somewhere down the line, this is going to have that character, you're thinking ahead. You do have to make sure you lay something in on this episode that's going to set the stage for that. Then it becomes a little harder because you're trying to force fit it into your story. And people who are really elegant story makers figure out a way to do that in a very organic way. It just seems to be part of the story. And then when it pays off later, you go, oh my God, wow, I didn't even see that coming. That's the process.
Now, how difficult was it when you got on to Batman? Because I don't know if you can see it, but that's hands down my favorite Batmobile of all time. The one from the animated series. I'm not going to say, but
But you went the one that Bruce Timm designed?
Yeah. I'll pick it up right here.
Oh yeah.
The Batman fell. But that hands down, this cartoon was so informative at such a young age for me. Because Batman, and if you couldn't tell, I'm a huge Ninja Turtles fan back here, but Batman and Ninja Turtles, those were my two things that I was just bonkers over back in the day, especially that animated series. And I don't know if you wrote on this one, but The Heart of Ice was the first episode I ever saw from this series.
That's Paul Dini.
Yes. That dude is a master when it comes to pen and paper. That episode of that show sticks out because it's so dark, yet it's so much light to it as well. There's so much levity to it. There's so much heart behind that character, because very rarely do we see somebody and then you're like, he's just a bad guy. But you don't see what led him to breaking and becoming that bad guy. Nobody is 100% bad. I'm pretty sure there's somebody out there that's 100% bad. Richard Ramirez probably comes to mind. He was probably 100% fucked up the entire time. But for the most part, especially in these comic books and these movies, these characters that you guys build, there's flaws to them, but they're not 100% one thing. And then you see just the evolution of Mr. Freeze, from losing Nora to doing this to this, all of this stuff adds up. And it was even at a young age, I noticed that this was something that wasn't just a cartoon. It wasn't just a story. It wasn't just Batman. There was beauty behind this. And it's one of those cartoons that I still go back to when I feel I want to watch something that means something. That's the first episode that comes to my mind, The Heart of Ice. What was a normal day? What was a normal day when you were working on Batman? We'll get to Animaniacs, I'm sure. But when you were working on Batman, what would a normal day? Is that how you guys would all start? You'd all gather around a table and you start?
No. That was at the beginning of the season. We would just show up and go to our office. I would say, hey, Paul, we'd be talking. And I haven't seen Paul for a little bit. We don't live too far apart though. And we're Facebook friends, but we used to go to parties a lot. But when I see him again, we'll go to lunch. I'll tell him what you said, because I know that'll make him feel good. But Heart of Ice, I remember I had just come on board when I was working on it. And Alan was talking about it to me. He said, I love this. He's just holding this little, snow globe and all that. It's just perfect, beautiful. And I remember Heart of Ice came out. I don't know. I wrote a sequel to it, but it was a feature. It was called Sub-Zero.
Yes.
And so I went back to Heart of Ice. And you're right. There are, what makes Batman really a wonderful thing to write for. There are a couple things about it. Number one, Batman's human. You can kill him. So, it's very easy to put him in danger, to create conflict. And plus he's a little crazy, going out at night. Two is, you're right. You don't want it to all be black and white. Great drama doesn't happen when right meets wrong. It happens when right meets right. That's when you get a really interesting story. And with you're right. With Mr. Freeze, he's one of two villains. The other one, actually, I did. Now that I think about it, I did happen to write the first episode of that one. It was Two-Face.
Yeah.
It was a two-parter, and both Mr. Freeze and Harvey Dent.
Yep.
Freeze's name was
Victor Freeze.
Victor. Yeah, both Victor and Harvey, unlike all the other, the Penguin, the Riddler, the Joker, is they were not, they were victims themselves. They were not bad. They were the victims of something else that happened to them, and it caused them to go bad. And you're right. What's everybody motivated by? Arrogance for the Riddler. The Joker's basically a psychopath. Penguin would want money and power and all that. The thing that motivates Victor Freeze is love.
Yeah.
He's motivated by love for his wife. And so that when Boyd Kirk and I did Sub-Zero, I said, we should really tap into that. Is that he's got his wife now, because remember, he took her to the Arctic to keep her there. And then this tragedy happens where he has to bring her back. And that's the instigating or the inciting event for the story. So I agree. That's a really interesting character, and we mixed it with trying to flesh out Batgirl and Robin more. I don't know where else you were going with it. Did you have another episode that you were about to
no, it was just that whenever I want to watch something that I know is going to be good, or if I'm feeling down, I want to watch that because, like I said, it is about a bad guy, but you see that bad guy has a heart. It might be encased in ice, no pun intended, but he's got heart. He's got something that's motivating and driving him. What he thinks in his head is he's not thinking he's doing bad. He thinks what he is doing is going to save his wife. He thinks what he does is righteous and just. At the end of the day, whether I look at it as him being a bad guy or you looking at him being a bad guy, at the end of the day, he thinks what he is doing is just as noble as what Bruce Wayne does every night when he suits up to be Batman. Right.
Right.
So it's just interesting to see that. Yeah, it really is. It's interesting to see that dichotomy, that split, that divide where you're supposed to be against this person and you're supposed to be for this person, but it's all perspective at the end of the day. If you see somebody stealing food, right? And I think I brought this analogy up a few times. Aladdin, perfect example. He was stealing food to eat, yet he was giving that food to kids that were starving on the street. Same thing with Jasmine. She stole that apple to give it to somebody that was hungry. Yes, stealing is bad, but she was doing it and motivated by a good reason. And very rarely do we look at a villain or a character that is portrayed to be a villain and think, oh man, he's just doing this because he wants the money like Penguin, or he's just psychotic. He's a sociopath like the Joker. No, he's doing this to save his wife, the only person that got him. And being married, you get that. You think of oh shit, he loved her and she loved him so unconditionally that he's going to go through the ringer to bring her back, because that's what love is. And at the end of the day, it's so beautiful. And being such a young kid at that time, like I said, I knew there was something different about not only this show, but that episode alone. And I was hook, line, and sinker for the rest of my life as a Batman fan, just off that episode alone.
Yeah.
So
yeah. What's interesting to the conflict, see, for that is you can certainly get behind him, because you say, and we actually in Sub-Zero we do this, is all he wants to do is save his wife. He's motivated by love, but he's willing to take that to a darker place than most of us would. He's willing to kill somebody else so that he can save his wife. And so now it's an ethical problem. It's a moral dilemma. Can you hurt somebody else to help somebody else? And that's the dilemma. And that's what makes it interesting drama.
Now, when you told me earlier that you were doing Batman concurrently with Animaniacs, right? As long as you came up, you did your scripts and everything you were supposed to, they had no problem letting you go, correct?
Yes.
With that being said, was it hard going from I don't want to say dark, because if you look back at that time, yes, it was dark for that time. I mean, we're a couple years removed from Tim Burton's Batman, which back in the day was considered dark. Flash forward 15 years later, you're seeing Christian Bale and I'm blanking on his name. Christopher Nolan is the director. So you're seeing Heath Ledger's Joker, and that's dark.
Right.
So back then, looking back on it now, it's more campy, I guess, but it still had some dark elements. But there was two differences between Batman and Animaniacs. Animaniacs was just zany. It was fun. It was happy-go-lucky. There was no real dark parts. Being the creative guy you are, is it hard flipping that switch on and off from writing something that was dark to going to something that is nothing but fun and bright colors and funny characters and funny voices? Was it hard trying to find that balance between those two while you were writing both of them?
Well, it's just two different shows, but you will find that they're kind of two sides of the same story. A lot of comedy comes out of conflict
Yes.
on the dark side. And, the more serious, it's funny if you look at actors.
Mhm.
What I used to work at the Shakespeare Festival at the Old Globe Theater when I was a kid. What you can find, I wonder if actors would argue it, would dispute this with me. But my experience was, um, serious actors, people who do, serious acting, are much more able to do comedy
Mhm.
than the other way around. You take a comedian, a comic actor, and he tries to do something serious. It doesn't work.
Very
It's
few
tough.
people can make it do it.
Tougher. Yeah. Although people say, you've heard that old line, dying is hard. Dying is awful. Comedy is hard. In other words, it because in comedy you're kind of naked up there by yourself. But for me, I think it's just because of the stuff I read when I grew up. I loved that whole dark side of Batman. I love it. And and real stories, I remember at first there was a writer that was trying to come in. They sent me a script, and it was sort of a vampire, Vlad, coming back up, and it had all the super. And I said, I think you're writing for a different show here, because what makes Batman interesting is he lives in the natural world. Like Superman, we have, people with superpowers. With Batman, so if we start to introduce even the villains that were fantastic, like take Clayface, but he was rooted in a rational explanation that, he had this special, he was a makeup artist and it just fused into his skin. So we gave, even though it was an extraordinary explanation, it had some basis in the real world that you could grab onto. I thought, if you're going to introduce vampires now we can start having dragons and unicorns and fairy. It just becomes a different, and we can get out of our dilemma by calling on a magical being. And that's not what this show is. So it appealed to me for that reason. I mean, later on they brought in Ra's al Ghul, so they started, going in that direction. But for my part, comedy can be harder to write, because if they're not laughing, then it's not working. With a dark, how do you know how they're reacting to it? You just put this brooding thing. With comedy, you got to be clever. And with songs, it was even more tough for me, because all of that has to work within a rhyme scheme and a catchy melody and something that, so I would sit there and bleed. Some come quickly, other ones you bleed over. But I think for the most part in Hollywood too, as you go down the track of your career, you get known for something. Like you are an action adventure writer. You write or you write the thrillers. You would write like you say, the Christopher Nolan movies or the Marvel movies, or you'd write a small romantic comedy. They tend to niche you. My niche, I mean, I'm still writing for a lot of things, but my niche, clearly the one they call me for, is songwriting. That's what I'm known as, even though I'm working on a script for somebody else or something. But that Hollywood tends to take you where they see the more successes. So
Do you feel like, is that ever, and I don't want to, because you kind of hit on this when you were talking about the actor, because somebody else wrote it for you, somebody else dressed you, somebody else built your set. You just got to come here and you got to have that not the passion, but you got to have the skill, the talent to do that.
right.
When somebody says you're just known for the music, does that ever feel like, oh man, why am I being typecast? Or I can write too? Or are you just having fun with both aspects at this point, where it really just doesn't bother you?
Well, I love this question, because I have a real life story to tell you with Warner Brothers.
Okay.
I came on board with Batman, and I'm writing Batman, and it takes like a year, because you write that, then it goes into production, then it goes on the air, then Emmys come up. So you're like a year behind, for that. You've moved on to other things. So I'm writing Batman, and at that point, I started being interested in the Animaniacs, right? So I brought that up to me at the writers' meeting. Jean McCurdy was the president of Warner Animation. She was like mom, just wonderful lady. I brought that up and I said, yeah, I want to be writing for the Animaniacs. She goes, no. You write Batman, that you write that dark shit. And and Batman and Animaniacs is a comedy.
Yeah.
Comedy is me. So anyway, I write the song. so grad two, I get on Animaniacs, right? And I'm writing that. Well, I mean, I'm like, like 18 months gone by, whatever, since I started. And Alan comes up to my office one day. He goes, "Hey man, we're behind on Batman scripts. I was wondering, could you write a couple of Batman scripts for us?" And I thought, oh hell yeah, that'd be fun. I haven't written Batman for a while, you know. So the next Monday morning meeting, Gene's there, and we're all the writers. I said, yeah, this month, this month I'm gonna write a couple of Batman scripts. She goes, wait a minute, you write Animaniacs, that's comedy. Batman is that dark shit, you know. And I go, hey, lest we forget, we wanted Emmy, you wanted Emmy for the Batman script. You know, it's like you're only as good as your last sale. You know, they only remember that. So yeah, you definitely do get pigeonholed, and I don't really blame them for that, because exactly, they're looking for success. They want you to be doing what you do well. So you have to keep reminding them, no, I do this. That's right. That's why you'll see an actor like Dustin Hoffman wanted to break out and play. He said, "I'd make a great James Bond." They said, "No, that's not the kind of role we cast."
That's a great point to have, because we talked about earlier, very rarely can comedy come and do dramatic or serious roles. My favorite actor of all time has always been Robin Williams. It started with Mrs. Doubtfire. I mean, there is just something so magical about that man. I'm so sad that he's gone, and I never got a chance to say just thank you for everything he did. But that man is the I don't want to say the real life version of Mel Blanc, because Mel Blanc, he did what he did, but he was a dude that would just take on not only just roles, he would assume whatever role you wanted him, or he wanted to assume. I mean, the genie being one, him dressing up as an old British lady so he could see his kids. And then you go into, what was it? Is it 24-hour photo or shit? I'm blanking on the name, but where he turned into the psychopath and he was watching how everybody conducted their lives through taking photos, or 1 hour photo. That's the name of it. 1 hour photo was the name of that movie. And then I remember seeing that and thinking, that's not my Robin Williams. That I like my Robin Williams being funny. I don't want to watch that. And I put off watching that movie for the longest time. And then I got 13, 14, 15, somewhere around that range. And I said, I'm like, holy shit, this dude can do anything he wants to. And just seeing that change is just amazing. And the only reason I bring that point up is because we talked about you writing and then going into music. Is it easy to flip those roles? Is one easier, like putting on socks, is one side easier to slip into, or are they both kind of fluid with you? You can slip into writing a script if you need to, and music is just as easy to get in the mindset for.
I have to say, probably just because of my experience now, the songwriting's easier. I mean, I just have so much experience, and I'm like, but I'm also writing the script on the show. And so, I mean, I think I'm a pretty good writer, but I just spend more gut wrench time with the script than I do, although I spend enough time with the songs too. By the way, mentioning Robin Williams, because I haven't agree with you on that, Julian, is his breakout movie, I think, did both of what you're talking, and that was Good Morning Vietnam.
Yeah.
And I remember when I saw that, he plays a comic, but he plays a comic in the middle of the Vietnam War, where people are getting killed and dying. And so that movie had both the dark side and the comedy side, which made it so interesting to see him emerge out of it. I mean, Aladdin was strictly, laughs. Yeah. But one of the things, when you talk about 1 hour photo, this is one of the things that Hollywood is afraid of. And I think it's justified that they're afraid of. You're an exec at a motion picture studio making quite a bit of money, and your job is to make hit movies. And Robin Williams wants to make a serious movie. And you go, shit, I don't want to piss off Robin because I want to have him for this, But what'll happen is he'll make 1 hour photo. And what you want to do is sit down and say, like you'd sit down with Tom Hanks, who did Cloud Atlas, and it was terrible. And you say, Tom, everybody sees you as the Jimmy Stewart. They see you as the nice guy, and they're not going to accept you as the villain. Yeah, but I want to stretch. He goes, but the audience won't take you, won't do that. And I remember when I saw Cloud Out, I mean, we vote on the Academy Awards and all that. So I went over and I saw, just right here at Warner Brothers, I live next door. We saw the screening, and it was just like, it was awful. It was terrible to see him as a villain. You just wouldn't buy it because you know him so well as the Forrest Gump, kind of characters. So my guess why 1 hour photo maybe was not the big hit is because people have a hard time seeing Robin Williams like that. And you'll see actors try to break out. Look at Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. He was this Terminator, the big guy who always plays the Conan and all that. He's a big action adventure, big hero making 20 million a picture, but he's getting older.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got to, break out. And he wanted to do comedy.
Yeah.
So he calls up his friend, Jason, he's the son of a great, who directed Animal House.
Oh,
his son. His son did Kindergarten. So he got him to do Kindergarten Cop.
Mm-hmm.
And brought him, says, oh, come on, I thought you're my friend. I thought you were director. And he was able to make the leap. He actually made it. Who's it? Reitman. So it's not Ivan, right? Jason Reitman, his son. He got him to do Kindergarten Cop. I believe it was Jason. And maybe it was Ivan. But anyway, it was a really well-known comedy writer, a comedy director. And so he actually was able to make that leap. He was able to make Twins. He actually was able to get into some comedy. The one who was not successful at it was Sylvester Stallone. Yeah. Stallone was a great, he had just his career as Rocky and Rambo and all that. And so he wanted to start breaking, Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. He made a series of like 3 comedies. And that's when the studio said, okay, Sly, we spent all this money on you to give you this, so we gave you a shot. Now we need you to come back and do that. And a lot of times, I don't know the deal that Schwarzenegger made for Kindergarten Cop, but my guess is he wanted to do it. His agents said he really wanted, they said, okay, we'll let him do it. It's going to have a minimal budget. He ain't making 20 million on this picture, but he has to guarantee to us he will do another action movie for us, a Terminator 3 or something like that, or Terminator 2. And so that's how those get done. But the Hollywood execs are not unreasonable in that idea, because audiences tend to see a character in the way, like the Hugh Grant, that's the part he's going to play.
Yeah.
There are some people who transcend it. A person like Meryl Streep, I mean, she's an extraordinary actor. She can play many different roles, but she's more the rare person. What you find in Hollywood is people get to know you as that thing.
Yeah.
And that's when, they go, get me Julian. That's the guy, that's the guy I want. Yeah. I was with Tress. Tress is a big deal. Tress has done 500 episodes of The Simpsons. She's done every TV show there's been. She's all the, she's all the key characters on Futurama, except for Kitty Seagal's role, and every cartoon. Tress is arguably the most successful female voice artist in history, even above June Foray. Yes. If you look at the body of her work, Tress is a real sweetie. But we were at like a con and this girl came up on the, because they come up and they want to get an autograph or one of the pictures of Tress, or get a picture. And she just literally broke down crying, and I was so sad. And Tress got up, she came around the table and she took this girl in her arms and she talked directly to him. And I could see for Tress, it was, very meaningful for her to know that she had meant this much to this person's life. Because Tress is just probably doing her work. You're never thinking of that. You're just doing your work. But to know it has that kind of effect, I'm telling you, it's our honor, it's our privilege, it's our gift. It's the gift to us rather than the gift that we give to you.
Yeah, it for sure is a beautiful sentiment, and I'm so glad you brought up June Foray, because that's one person that I do not think gets brought up enough. I'm reading a book about J. Ward Productions now, the Moose That Roared. Phenomenal book if you haven't read it. And it talks about every role she did and then how she got, and everybody around her was just talking about how phenomenal she was.
She was royalty. When she would come, come over to Warner Brothers, when she, when we were there, Chuck Jones had an office there. Come on. They're not letting him do work, but and we would go into Julian for lunch. We'd go into his office and we're all professionals, and we would sit Indian style, like little kids, eating our sandwich for our lunch. And he would hold court, and we'd ask him these questions, and he'd be telling it, and June was in that royalty before she passed away. Boy, she lived quite a long time. I think she was almost 100.
99 years old.
I mean, God, she came up, I'm small, and she came like here on me, this little tiny woman with this voice who could do anything. And she was the sweetest, most generous person. She was always interested in everything. Really, it's and guys like Mel Blanc, I don't know if Rob went into to do a recording session one time for a show, and sitting there is Mel Blanc.
Mhm.
And Rob is sitting next to Mel Blanc. And Rob, who's never starstruck, I mean, he was younger then, looks over, you know, hello, Mr. Blanc. My name is Paul Rafa. And I was just wondering, he wanted to ask him, but he didn't have the nerve to ask him. And Mel Blanc just looked at him and went, what's up? That he get, and Rob just crumbled. It's like, oh my God. I had that. I was at some friends of my girlfriend. She was very close with Gary Marshall, and he had these really front row box table at the Hollywood Bowl he would let us use. So we were sitting there, I could touch the stage. And so it's sort of this, the section for, section I wouldn't normally be in, but the really wealthy, big movers and shakers. And in walks Neil Simon. Now you have to understand, Neil Simon had an enormous effect on me because of my generation. The guy had 4 Broadway shows. I mean, he just is a legend. I live in Hollywood. I see stars all the time. I crumbled. And I just said, I was saying with Gary's sister, she goes, why don't you talk to him? And I go, so I just went up and it was basically, hello, Mr. Simon. My name is Randy. I'm a writer. And he goes, sit down. So he sits and talks to me. I get my pictures, like my bucket list moment, So those are the June forays, those kind of people are our heroes and we're very, very generous. So we try to do the same,
That's always beautiful here. I think Rob, it was either Rob or Billy told me a Mel Blanc story similar to that one. I think it was Rob.
Yeah.
And with Rob, that was the first podcast I ever released. That was like maybe my second weekend. I had 2 people at the top of my list. I pretty much peaked after those 2 people is what I'm getting at, Randy. I always wanted to talk to Billy and I always wanted to talk to Rob. It was something about those 2 guys. I don't know what it was.
Just good choices.
Yeah, it's just like those dude. When you think of like voice acting, at least for me, those are the first 2 people I always think of. It's just so many characters from my childhood.
What
Go ahead.
It is. And what's interesting, Julian, too, because I did this thing for Netflix, right? And they really wanted Billy. Mm-hmm. And I brought in Rob too. So I wrote these, I called Billy. I said, Billy, can you do this for me? He goes, sure, okay, sure. Yeah. And so I brought him in. Now, you have to understand, these guys walk in and they're jokesters, they're having fun. But then you have to see, they get on the mic and this transformation happens right before your eyes where they become total pros. I mean, they take what they do very seriously, even though they're joking around. And with Billy, he just did one voice after the other. It was a song I'd written for him, and he just knocks it over the fence. And I look at it and I'm going, wow. I mean, these are guys you can sit out and have a beer and talk and laugh. But when they do what they do, they're thoroughbreds. They're thoroughbreds at what they do. Not many people can do what they do. So it's a real, I think to get them on your show, that was pretty cool of you.
Yeah. When they both said yes, I'm like, what do I do now? And with Billy, I did like we're doing now with Zoom. Rob was over the phone. And it's probably a good thing that one was over the phone. One day I hope to have him back on where we can meet face to face. But there were so many times where my eyes would get really, really misty when he would tell these stories, or he would roll right into voice after voice after voice. And then I've said it 100 times on here, there's nothing crazy like a voice or a smell or a piece of food that really takes your brain back to when you first taped. Yeah. You just like, oh shit, you made me feel like a kid again. I haven't felt like I was 12 in at least 20 years, right? So it's always fascinating to meet those type of people that make you feel like you're the most important person at that time, and they have the time for you, right? It was just phenomenal. But getting back to you, I apologize for going off on that little tangent there.
No problem.
So you get to where you get to with the Animaniacs, and you're doing all these songs, and I don't want to say you're pumping them out like you're just putting out trash, but you're pumping out hit after hit after hit after hit with these ones. Was there one, and I got to take out Yakko's World just so it's not an easy, I don't want to put it to the plate for you and you just knock it out of the park right there and you pick Yakko's World. But if we took Yakko's World out of it, is there one that sticks out in the mind to you that was super difficult for you to write, but once it was done and once it was executed by the actors and actresses that you just fell in love with?
Well, it's an interesting question. Our producer, Steven Spielberg, was asked that question too, about what's your favorite movie that you made? And he says, like, why don't you ask me which one of my kids I like best? It's that you work hard on all of them. I tell you, when we're doing the show, I get this kind of question sometimes because we do talk back too. And they say, like, what's the hardest song you ever wrote?
Mhm.
I say, it's the song I'm writing right now. That's always the hardest song. Is like I just finished one for this stage musical that we're doing. I'm agonizing over it. But once it's done, it's perfect. You go, oh well, that seems easy. That's done. So, and some come quick and some don't. Now, I will tell you, we had back in '94 we had this huge earthquake in LA. By the way, we're due again, and my house really got trashed. So a lot of other people. And so I remember my son at the time, boy, he says, "Hey, Dad, why don't you write a funny song about an earthquake?" And I'm going, you know, what's funny about an earthquake? I mean, people died, property destroyed, and all that. And so I was thinking about it, and I'm driving home on the 405 on the freeway, and I'm just thinking a quake or an earthquake, quake, and I went a quake. The house begins to shake. You're bouncing across the floor and watching all your dishes break. And I got this idea, it just came to me. I pulled my car over the side of the freeway illegally on the shoulder, right? Stopped my car. And I had it, fortunately, I had a pad of paper or something. And that song just came right out of me. I mean, I just wrote it in one sitting. If a cop had come up and said, "What are you doing?" I'd have said, "Write me the ticket, but don't stop me right now. Just let me keep going," right? And that's one of the rare times that song just flowed right out of me. And I remember getting home and telling my wife, I go, "Wow, this thing is like, it just fell out of place." You tweaked it a little bit. Other ones, I would just, I'd write like, "Nah, it's not good enough that," and tweak it and tweak it and tweak it. So I don't think there's any one process, but I love them all. I tell you what, if I didn't like a song I wrote or a script I wrote, you would never see it.
Beautiful.
I just wouldn't turn it in, So I only turn it in and do it if I think it's good. And I get that feeling. So I go, okay, this is good. Some of them do better. Somebody said, "No, I don't like that." So I go, okay, well, that fine. But you're wrong. It's a good song. It's just that it may not hit, with the people. But fortunately, my sensibilities met with people like you who like the songs I wrote. So I feel fortunate for that.
Now, there's only one question that was unanswered.
Hey, by the way, just a question about you. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go first, man. I've asked you enough questions. You go first.
You say when you were in the Navy, what was your MOS? What were you?
I was a supply guy. We started out as an SK, a storekeeper, and then we merged with PPs, which are the postal clerks, and then we became logistics specialists, LSs. So I was the guy that everybody loved and hated simultaneously. I could get you and order you anything from toilet paper to bomb parts. I was generally everybody's best friend, and I would always get snacks and stuff like, "Hey man, I really need this. Here's some tropical Skittles, or here's, a Twinkie or something like that." They would always try to hook me up so I could hook them up, so.
And you were actually stationed on board. What vessels were you? Were you on aircraft carriers or?
I was on a couple. I started out on the, I think it wasn't the oldest ship at the time, but it was the USS Emory S. Land, AS-39. It was a subtender. And I went to Bremerton. My first station.
I've been to Bremerton many times. Yeah,
I'm still trying to get back there. It was the most beautiful place I have ever lived at. And really? As far as the state,
why don't you take the ferry over from Seattle to Bremerton?
Yeah. We would take the ferry, and the pigeons were really, really they were aggressive. So we would get French fries. I think it was Ivers or Ivans or something like that. It was the guy.
Yeah, Ivers.
Yeah. So we would get out there and we would get a thing of French fries, and we were sitting down at a table one time. This is when I thought, man, we just got to get this on the ferry and go, because the seagulls are just starting to land. They're trying to eat your fish. They're trying to steal your French fries. They're just a menace, right? So we get it on the boat, and I noticed oh man, they're flying this way. So let me see how far I can get these seagulls to fly. So I took the ferry from Seattle to Bremerton on one carton of large French fries, and from Bremerton back to Seattle. The same seagull followed me the entire way, and I was just feeding this little guy French fries. It was the coolest ride ever. Everybody's just looking at me weird, like, "Look at this fucking tourist over here just feeding these guys French fries and stuff." But it was fun. And then I went to San Diego, stationed there for a little while. And then
Coronado?
No, I was on yes, Coronado, excuse me. I was trying to think of the other name. I was like, "Oh, where all the rich people live," and they didn't like us. They wanted us out of there. The airfield.
That's La Jolla.
Yeah. But yeah, it was Coronado, and then because you had wet side and dry side, so I was on the aviation side. And then we deployed again, and then I went and ended up in Jacksonville. deployed again, came back, and then I went to Norfolk. I was only in for 7 years and 4 months. I had a very unusual career because most of the time you'll hit one tour or you'll hit one command. You're there for 4 years. You might hit a deployment, maybe two, depending on the type of ship you're on, and then you go to shore duty. I hit sea duty, sea duty, sea duty, deployment, deployment.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was
I
definitely.
was, yeah, I got to go on a couple of, I was an Army officer, so I didn't get, but I got to go on a couple of those ships. And it just blew me away how big those things were.
Do you remember which one you went on?
Yeah, I went on the USS Eisenhower.
Okay,
It came into Venice. I was living in Europe and it came into Venice.
Mhm.
So I went on and I couldn't believe because there were 5,000 people stationed on that aircraft carrier. And at the little caserma, I was in Italy. We were on a little remote site co-located with the Italian battalion. The whole thing of every unit and everything didn't even add up to 5. And I'm talking about multiple units, didn't add up to 5,000. I couldn't believe there could be that many people. It's like a city floating on that.
Oh, it's a floating. You said La Maddalena, Italy?
No, it was Vicenza, Italy.
Okay, because the boat I was on, the first boat I was on was stationed. I think it was Lamada, Italy, or something like that. And then it came over. And when it came over to the States, because when ships go out for so long, they have to go into the dry dock period. They have to get fixed and renovated and all this other stuff. This ship came over, and I know you can't really get an estimation for it, but the holes like this big in the hull, right?
No.
Plugged and patched this thing. This thing was leaking. I remember the first little thing that they gave me to do. We had to go down there and bust rust. So we had this needle gun, and it has all these little pieces of metal at different lengths, and then you pull the trigger, and it gets all the rust off. So everything's got a nice smooth finish. The first question I asked, because we were in dry dock and there was a little bit of water that we were sitting in because they were doing some renovations, and I go, "Hey man, I can't go through the hole, correct?" And they're like, "No, it's straight steel." And I'm like, "Okay, no problem." So I'm sitting over there busting rust for 8 hours and stuff, got my little face mask on. So end of the day comes, we go home, and I'm getting off the boat because I don't have duty that day. So I get to go home that day. So I'm getting off the boat, and as I'm getting off the boat, I hear the bells ringing. Water, water, water. We got a water leak. So something started leaking. And then I start hearing, I'm like, well, this isn't my problem. So I'm just going to walk home. I'm not on duty. This is these guys' problem. And then I hear him call out the compartment number, which is the space it was in. And I was like, huh, that sounds really close to where I was at. And I was like, huh, that's weird. So I come back the next day and I go to my storeroom and I'm, resuming what I was doing, painting and busting rust and all this other stuff. And then everything's taped off. They said, do not go, leaking, all this other stuff. So I had apparently went a little bit too deep, I guess, or something had happened where there was so much rust down there that I was busting that water started flooding into my compartment. So they had to go down there they had to go down. It wasn't much. It was maybe, 3-4 inches of water on the deck. It wasn't a lot of water, but they told me, they joked all the time that I almost sank the battleship. But
you almost sank the battleship.
So it was.
Listen, I'm just getting a notice here. I'm going to need to get going here. Did you have another 1 or 2 questions for me?
Yes, I did. I wanted to know, did your son get credit? And was he the youngest person to get credit for a song?
Yeah, he would be, because I wrote that song to teach him the countries of the world. And that's what I was thinking, because my mom, his grandmother, gave him this little globe, like the little globes get you. And so we're sitting there, as I was saying, yeah, United States, Canada, Mexico, I was thinking, hey, what if I make a song? So he'll inherit all the royalties for that.
Beautiful.
He's done very well for himself. He's a top level electrical engineer. He designs like the inside of a chip that would go in, your iPhone or something. He's a brilliant engineer, but he's my inspiration for songs.
Good for him, man. I'm glad. I hope he gets to hear that too, because that's always a beautiful sentiment that most people don't get to see, from their mom or their dad. They don't get to say like, oh man, I was such an inspiration. So it's always cool to see that type of thing get done. So I do have one more question here.
Sure.
And but before we get to that, I know you said that the Animaniacs tour is starting to come back. Do you have any, not so much dates, but do you have any cities or states that for sure that you guys are going to be in?
Yeah, we're going to definitely be in August. We're going to be in Phoenix.
Okay.
In October, we're going to be in Lynchburg, Virginia. Then starting in January, we are like all through the Midwest. And then in February, we're all on the East Coast. But the way to see where we're going to be, go to animaniacslive.com. That's our website. And it tells you where we're going to be, when we're going to be, how you can get tickets. It's a really fun show.
Okay.
And it, has different incarnations. The one we're doing in Virginia is a full symphony, 88 pieces. Other ones we do smaller versions of the show, but they're all really fun. And if you like animation, if you like comedy, and if you like music and funny songs, and then and it's the guy, there's Rob, there's the people who actually did those voices. Sometimes we bring Tress, sometimes we bring Jess and all that, and me. So it's a very fun show. And the one thing I will say that's turned out to be a delightful thing is the show appeals to adults as well as kids. Most of the people in our audience are adults,
Yeah.
which is really surprising to me. But we've got lots of animation on the screen and all that. So it's terrific. If you get a chance, it's just a really fun show. You'll love it.
Well, I hope you guys come close to Orlando because I'll make sure I attend for sure. And the last
All right. Well, if we come, I'm gonna get your tickets for you.
Oh, beautiful. That's a great thing. Last question, and I don't know if you know this guy, but it sounded like he with the question he asked, you might know him. You know a Bob Greenwade?
I think I do. Bob. Let me see if I have in my. Where does Bob live?
I'm not sure because I always post these questions all social media, and then I tagged Rob and everybody that had anything to do with the Animaniacs. I'm like, hey, if you guys have a question for Randy, pop it in the thing, and then I'll make sure I ask it. And his was really, really fun. And I know he was followed by a few of those guys like Rob and Tress and Jess, or Rob and Jess. So, but he wanted to know. He's like, Bob asked, I want to know if it's possible to find the sheet music for the song Hello Nurse anywhere. If so, where and how much?
Well, I don't think it's out there, but I certainly can give it to him. One time we went to one of these cons, and so I made up a music book, but with my charts that I wrote, and those sold out so fast. I was like stunned how fast it was gone. So as we do Animaniacs Concert, I'm going to probably make some more. But did Bob say he and I are we Facebook friends? Are we
I'm not sure. Like I said, I think Rob followed him on Twitter, so I don't know if they were friends or if he might have been a friend from back in the day, or you guys might have crossed
Maybe
paths.
I met him at one of the concerts. Tell Bob what to do. Contact you have my contact information. Okay. So have him send you his email address, and then you send it to me, and I will email him the sheet music for that my chart. It's a piano, I assume, but I mean it'll be a lead sheet with all the changes and all that, so you can play it on any instrument you want.
Beautiful. That was really nice.
Yes, because he's with the Julian. Your last name is Hester. What's your last name?
Hester. Yes.
Hester, right?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So for him being on the Julian Hester show, we will give him that sheet music as a complimentary.
Beautiful. I'm pretty sure Bob's going to get a real kick out of that, man. But I've had so much fun. Is there anything that we might have missed? Where can people go to find you if they wanted to say, hey, Randy, thanks for making my childhood so great, or thanks for making so much fun things for me?
Oh, well, can they, how about can they Facebook Messenger me? Is that?
Yeah, that'll work. And I'll put all of your links for all of your social media in the video as well. That way people can go say, hey, I want to follow Randy, and they're going to follow you. So
absolutely. I need to be better at that. Rob's so good because I am on Instagram and Facebook, but I need to be so better presence. But they can get to me to that. I read all of that and respond to all of that. And definitely to follow Animaniacs Live, go to animaniacslive.com because that's not just the show, but it's what's going on with the show, Animaniacs too. Because the show's back on the air and back in production. So, and Steven Spielberg is producing it, so it's all very active. But yeah, I love all the fans. I want to see them all. I want to talk to them all. So, tell them, keep watching, come to the concerts, and we do not just topic but meet and greets too. So we actually get to spend some time with the fans after the show.
Beautiful. That's a great thing, man. He's been Randy. I've been Julian. This has been the What's in My Head podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and seeing what's good in animation and pop culture. Randy, thank you again, sir, and you have a great day.
Okay. Thank you, Julian. It's been a real pleasure to be on your show.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.